Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take complex topics, dig into the sources, and pull out the key insights for you. If you want to get up to speed on something important quickly, you're in the right place.
That's the plan.
Today, we're heading high into the Himalayas to talk about the conservation of the endangered red panda. And we're framing this specifically for someone, maybe like you, who's new to conservation but really wants to understand what it's all about.
Yeah, and we've got two scientific studies to unpack. Now, these research papers, they can look pretty intimidating, right? Lots of jargon.
Definitely.
So our job today is to translate them, cut through the technical language, and get to the heart of what they found about red pandas and their homes.
Exactly. And you might be wondering, okay, a cute furry animal, but why should I really care? Well, red pandas are fascinating. They're literally the only species left in their entire biological family, a living fossil almost. And they're endangered. Their numbers are dropping. Studying them, thinking about how to protect them, it tells us so much about bigger environmental challenges in the Himalayas, a region that's critical for water, for biodiversity, for, well, the planet.
Absolutely.
So our mission for this deep dive: understand what these two studies tell us about where red pandas can live, what they need, and, crucially, what the similarities and differences between the studies mean for actually helping them survive.
Okay, let's start with the first one. This is Thapa et al., published in 2020. The title is The Endangered Red Panda in Himalayas, Potential Distribution and Ecological Habitat Associates.
Right, so Thapa and colleagues, what were they trying to achieve with this research?
Their main goal was twofold.
Yeah.
First, to figure out where in Nepal red pandas could potentially live, mapping the suitable areas. And second, to pinpoint the really important habitat features. What makes a particular spot a good home for a red panda in Nepal?
And where did they look? Just one park?
No, they covered a good range. They surveyed in several protected areas, national parks and the like, but also in community-managed forests. And they did this across western, central, and eastern Nepal. So a fairly broad snapshot within the country.
Okay, but how do you find red pandas? They're pretty elusive, aren't they? Did they, tag them?
No, not in this study. Seeing them directly is tough. So they look for indirect signs, mostly their droppings. Scientists call it scat or feces.
Right. Poop science?
Pretty much. They walked set paths called transects and recorded every time they found red panda signs. And importantly, at those locations, they measured a whole bunch of things about the habitat.
Like what? What kind of habitat details?
Oh, lots of things. What type of forest it was, pine, oak, mixed, how dense the tree cover was, the canopy cover, the elevation, how steep the slope was, how far to the nearest village, whether there was bamboo. Bamboo's super important food for them.
Okay.
And they also checked for signs of disturbance, like cattle grazing. Plus, they incorporated something called bioclimatic variables.
Bioclimatic variables. Sounds complex. Break that down for us.
It's basically climate data. Think average temperatures in summer and winter, total rainfall, how much the temperature swings across the year, stuff that really dictates where plants and animals can live.
Got it. Climate factors. And they use a specific tool you mentioned, Maxent.
Yeah, Maxent modeling. So imagine you have your map points where you found panda signs, and you have other map layers showing temperature, forest type, elevation, all that.
Yeah.
Maxent is essentially a smart algorithm. It learns the environmental recipe from the places you know pandas exist. Then it scans the whole map and says, okay, where else has this same recipe? It predicts the potential distribution.
Ah, okay. So it finds similar spots they might like, even if they haven't been recorded there. Makes sense. What did this Maxent model predict for Nepal?
A key finding was that only about 14.7%, maybe just under 15%, of Nepal's total area seems climatically suitable. That's around 21,000, 22,000 square kilometers. And most of that potential habitat was concentrated in the eastern part of the country.
Interesting. And which climate factors were most important in driving that prediction?
The model highlighted a few main ones. The average temperature during the warmest 3 months, the difference between the year's highest and lowest temperatures, the annual range, the average temperature in the coldest 3 months, and also how much precipitation falls in that coldest period.
Okay, temperature seems key. They also use another analysis, MFA.
Right. Multiple factor analysis, MFA. It's a statistical technique that lets you see how different groups of variables relate to each other. So they looked at climate variables as one group, habitat features as another, geographic location as a third, and disturbance factors as a fourth.
And what did that analysis show? Did it confirm the climate focus?
Well, it showed that the habitat variables, the stuff on the ground like forest type and canopy cover, and the geographic variables like elevation and distance to settlements, were actually highly influential. more so in this analysis than the broader climate variables alone. And disturbance, like grazing, seem to have a lower overall contribution in their findings.
So the immediate surroundings matter a lot. What specific habitat features really stood out as being linked to red panda presence?
They found pandas were more likely in mixed forests, broadleaf and conifer together, and also a type called East Himalayan oak laurel forest. They like decent tree cover, over 20%. They often left droppings just on the ground. Bamboo cover, again over 20%, was important. And interestingly, places with tree stumps and small fallen logs seemed preferred, and areas without livestock grazing.
What about elevation? Did they stick to certain heights?
Generally, yes. Most signs were found between 2,400 and 3,800 meters. There was some regional variation, but that was the main zone, and they often seemed to prefer slopes facing northeast. Forest types like fir, temperate oak, and those mixed forests kept popping up as important.
Okay, that's a really detailed picture from the Thapa study in Nepal. Now let's switch gears to the second study. Candle and colleagues, 2015. This one sounds much bigger in scope. Rapid multi-nation distribution assessment in the Hindu-Kush Himalaya region.
Yeah, much bigger. This study wasn't just Nepal. It aimed to look at potential red panda distribution across the entire Hindu-Kush Himalaya, the HKH. We're talking 8 countries: Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, Nepal, India, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Myanmar.
Whoa! That's huge. How on earth did they collect data for an area that vast? They couldn't walk transects everywhere.
Exactly, they couldn't. So for this scale, they relied on existing publicly available data, primarily records of where red pandas or their signs like droppings had already been documented by other researchers or organizations over the years. It's called presence-only data. They gathered it all together.
Okay, so using existing records, how did they model that across such diverse countries?
They used something called ensemble modeling. Instead of relying on just one prediction method like Maxent, they used several different ones, different algorithms like random forest, TreeNet, Mars. And then they combined the predictions from all these different models. The idea is, if multiple different methods generally agree on where pandas might be, you could be more confident in the result. It helps smooth out the quirks of any single method.
Like getting a second, third, and fourth opinion. Makes sense. What was a major outcome of this ensemble approach?
Yeah, a big achievement was creating the first comprehensive potential distribution map for red pandas across the whole HKH region using this open access data approach. And they found their models were generally quite accurate. They used a measure called AUC.
AUC, what's that tell you?
It's basically a score for how well the model distinguishes between suitable and unsuitable areas. A score closer to 1 means it's doing a great job. Their models had high AUC values, suggesting they were pretty good predictors, and they noted that one specific method, random forest, seemed to perform best overall.
And what environmental factors did their models point to as being most important across this huge region? Was it still temperature?
Yes, temperature came out strongly again. In fact, they found temperature variables were generally more important than precipitation variables for predicting distribution at this large scale. Things like the annual mean temperature, the daily temperature fluctuation, how much temperatures change seasonally, the maximum temps in summer, minimum temps in winter, these were key. Interestingly, altitude by itself wasn't as strong a predictor as these specific climate measurements.
Huh. So climate, especially temperature, really drives the big picture. What did they estimate for the total amount of potential habitat across the HKH?
Their estimate was around 47,000 square kilometers of potential habitat across the entire region, which they noted was actually quite a bit lower than some previous, perhaps less rigorous estimates. They also found that China and Nepal appear to hold the largest shares of this potential habitat.
Did they try to check if these big computer models actually made sense on the ground?
They did. They used expert opinion, basically showing their maps to scientists who know red pandas well in different countries and asking, does this look right based on your experience? They also used statistical checks to see how much uncertainty there was. And overall, the model predictions matched up pretty well with what's known about where pandas are generally found or known to be absent across those nations.
Okay, so we have these two studies, Thapa et al., doing a deep dive in Nepal with lots of ground-level detail, Candle et al., taking this huge broad view across 8 countries using existing data and climate models. Let's compare them. What's the big similarity?
Well, the core goal is the same, right? Both are trying to understand where red pandas live so we can do a better job of protecting them. Mapping distribution is fundamental conservation science.
And the most obvious difference is just the sheer scale.
Absolutely. Nepal versus the entire Hindu-Kush Himalaya. That's a massive difference in geographic scope. Thapa gives you that fine-grained look within one country. Candle gives the regional overview.
The methods they used to predict were different too, you said.
Yes. Thapa relied heavily on Maxent, coupling it with that MFA analysis to bring in detailed habitat data. Candle used that ensemble approach, combining multiple machine learning algorithms, which is often better suited for these larger, maybe slightly less detailed, data sets covering vast areas.
And that links to the data itself, right? Tapa had field measurements of bamboo and logs.
Exactly. Tapa's team was out there measuring specific habitat features. Candle's team, working across borders, primarily used the readily available presence records and broader-scale bioclimatic data layers that cover the whole region.
So even with those differences, did they point to similar important factors?
Both highlighted temperature as being really important, but you could say Candle et al., with their huge scale, put a stronger emphasis on climate as the overarching driver across the HKH. Tapa et al., with their focused Nepal study, gave more weight to those specific local habitat features, the forest structure, the ground conditions.
Which makes sense. Maybe climate sets the broad boundaries, and local habitat dictates exactly where they are within those boundaries.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah.
Did their estimates for Nepal, the area both studies covered, match up?
They were in the same ballpark, but not identical.
Yeah.
Tapa estimated that roughly 21,700 square kilometers based on climate. Candle's estimates for Nepal, depending on the specific model within their ensemble, were sometimes a bit lower, sometimes similar. These differences aren't surprising given the different methods, the specific variables they fed into the models, and the overall scale they were working at.
Okay, so bringing this all together, why does knowing this stuff, the distribution, the habitat needs, actually matter for saving red pandas?
Oh, it's crucial. If you don't know where the animals are and what kind of places they need, how can you protect them effectively? These kinds of maps help conservation managers identify the absolute priority areas for protection.
Right, like creating new reserves or focusing patrols.
Exactly, or guiding habitat restoration. If you know they need certain forest types with bamboo understory, you can focus reforestation efforts on that. It helps make conservation actions much more targeted and efficient.
And that Candle study's emphasis on climate. That seems pretty important with climate change happening.
Definitely. It strongly suggests that shifts in temperature patterns across the Himalayas could really squeeze the available habitat for red pandas in the future. That's a huge red flag for their long-term survival and something conservation plans absolutely need to consider.
It also sounds like Candle's approach, using open data, sharing methods, is valuable in itself for science.
For sure. Promoting open access to data and using transparent modeling methods like they did really helps push the science forward. It means other researchers can test the findings, build upon them, maybe apply similar techniques to other species. It fosters collaboration.
So, is the picture complete now? Do we know everything we need to know?
Oh, definitely not. These studies are fantastic steps, providing really valuable insights. But there's always more to learn. We still need more ground truthing going out to check the model predictions in the real world. And we need more research on the really fine-scale interactions. How exactly do pandas use specific features? How do they respond to different types of human activity up close? The work continues.
So, wrapping this deep dive up, it seems clear that both these studies offer vital pieces of the puzzle. Thapa et al. Gives us that detailed, on-the-ground perspective in Nepal, while Kendall et al. Provides the crucial big-picture view across the entire mountain range.
Exactly. You really need both perspectives, the fine detail and the broad context, to develop smart, effective conservation strategies for a species spread across such a challenging landscape.
Which brings us to our final thought for you. We've seen slightly different estimates of how much good habitat is out there. We know the threats from human activity are real, and the Candle study flags climate change as a major concern. So thinking about all that, what do you believe are the most critical, the most urgent actions we need to take right now to make sure red pandas can survive, and hopefully even thrive, across the Himalayas for the long haul? It's a complex challenge spanning multiple countries and cultures. Hopefully today's deep dive gave you some food for thought. Thanks for joining us.